Hola a todos. I am here today with my incredible niece, Angelika. She graduated with a master's degree in global studies from Gothenburg, Sweden. She has her bachelor's from DePaul University in Chicago in international studies and Spanish. That is a lot to say. It sounds super impressive. I'm so happy to have her here today. Thank you, Angelika, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yes, salud.
Salud.
So Angelika, I know I should take a drink too,
Yeah,
right? Angelika, I think it's not so common for Americans to learn a second or even a third language because you speak English, Spanish, and Swedish. What inspired you to learn languages?
Yeah, so I come from a very multicultural family. My dad comes from Finland originally. And so I've grown up always with sort of like a cultural understanding that there's more out there than just the culture that we live in here in the US. So it's always been like something that's in the back of my mind, like I want to learn new languages because everyone in my family speaks at least 3 languages.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so yeah, it's almost been just something that's super normal for me, you know, and I feel very lucky to have had the opportunities that I've had to learn these languages. So
that's amazing. Pensé que sería divertido hablarte un poco en español y me encantaría saber cómo aprendiste a hablar español.
Sí, claro. Vale, pues cuando era niña viví en Guatemala con mi familia y era ahí donde aprendí más o menos básico español, pero era luego cuando decidí que quiero aprender más y decidí estudiarlo en la universidad. Y luego en mi tercer año de la universidad mudé a España y era en España donde aprendí la mayoría de lo que sé ahora.
Wow, increíble. Hablas muy bien español.
Gracias. Tengo que practicar un poco, pero
siempre es una cosa con los idiomas. And do you think that learning Spanish, getting a degree in Spanish versus going overseas, like what do you even need to get a degree in Spanish? What did you have to do in university?
So I'm sure it depends on the university that you go to. But at DePaul, where I got my Spanish degree, it was basically a sort of like a trifecta where you would do reading and then oral presentations and conversation. So it was a mixture of that, and the classes were always in Spanish, never in English. You weren't allowed to speak to anyone in English in the class. But I will say that it's really difficult to learn a language if you're not in a country where they speak the language primarily. Though I studied Spanish basically from the time I was in 5th grade up until my 3rd year of university, I didn't really gain a really rich understanding of the language until I moved to Spain, where I was like forced into it.
Yeah. And did you feel like moving to Spain, like, I don't know Spanish at all now?
Yes.
Yeah, because I had that same thing when we moved. I'm like, oh my gosh, immersion.
Yeah, definitely. Also because the basis of my Spanish from then on was from Latin America. And also in the US, we primarily study Latin American Spanish. So when I moved to Spain, it felt like a completely different language with not only the accent, but the slang and everything. I was like, I can't do this. What am I doing? But
And did you take on the Spain accent? Did you start speaking with the Barcelona, gracias, and that?
Yeah, I would say when I'm there, I do speak with that accent. But in just like my normal everyday life, I sort of speak a mix of Latin American and Spanish. So.
And so then after Spanish, what made you decide to learn Swedish? How did you learn Swedish?
Yeah, so my family's main language is Swedish, though we come from Finland. There's a small population in Finland that speaks Swedish primarily. So I've always wanted to, like, when I grew up, I could understand a lot of Swedish. My grandmother would speak to me in Swedish and then I could answer in English. But I always wanted to be able to like have in-depth conversations with her because I know it would mean so much to her, and then also with my dad and the rest of my family. So yeah, and I had a cousin at the time that was living in Gothenburg.
Okay.
So I decided, I was like, you know, after I graduate, like if nothing else really pops up, I might as well just move to Sweden and get my master's degree, and then I'll just learn some Swedish.
Yeah. So did you learn spoken Swedish while being in Sweden then?
Yeah, I will say it was pretty difficult because everybody in in Sweden speaks amazing English.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit difficult to get people to practice with you. But I took a lot of Swedish classes through the university, and I think that helped me a lot.
Okay.
And then honestly, just calling home and being able to talk to my grandmother on the phone in Swedish, that helped me a lot.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you be able to say like something that you enjoy doing in Swedish so we could hear? I know nothing in Swedish.
Yeah.
I put you on the spot here.
Okej, men jag vet inte. Men jag älskar att prata med min familj och min familj och jag vet inte. Chilla con min kompisar och
wow, it sounds cool. Yeah. What did you just say?
Yeah, so I just said that I really like to, or I love to speak to my family and my familj, which means grandmother in Swedish. And that I also just like to hang out with friends and yeah.
Cool.
So,
and did you find that after learning Spanish, Swedish was easier to learn?
No, I found the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
even
actually
harder.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually funny because Swedish is really similar to English, much more than Spanish is.
Really?
But because I had learned Spanish as my second language, I was always trying to compare Swedish and Spanish.
Okay.
So I would say some Swedish words with a Spanish accent, or I would like include Spanish words in the middle of sentences. Like just now when I was speaking Swedish, I wanted to say no sé.
Oh yeah.
But I had to say instead, jag vet inte.
Okay.
So it's still, it's like a constant struggle in your mind, you know?
And do you have any like funny language stories or any fail stories, or because learning a language is hard and often I find that I've just said things completely the wrong way or embarrassed myself, or it's just part of the journey of learning. But I would love to hear if you have any.
Oh my gosh, well I probably have more than I can count, but one that sticks out in particular was last summer I had my first job interview in Spanish for a position that I was going after in Spain. I was living in the US at the time. So not only was it in Spanish, but I also had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do this interview.
Okay. Wow.
So I was not only exhausted, but also super nervous because I hadn't really spoken Spanish in a while. So, but the interview, for the most part, it went okay. Like, I think I answered like all the normal interview questions. And then we got towards the end of it where we were figuring out logistics and stuff. And I was trying to say that I needed her to sign something. And I couldn't think of the word firmar. So I kept saying skriver, which is to sign in Swedish.
Okay.
And she had no idea what I was talking about. She was like, no entiendo lo que estás diciendo. And I was like, what, like skrive? Like what, I don't understand. And then I was like, you know, like to sign. And she's like, firmar? And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, how could I forget something so basic?
But it's part of learning and it's part of the process. That's awesome. So being that you speak Swedish and Spanish, I would love to hear some of your tips. What would you tell somebody that's trying to learn their first foreign language?
So it is obviously very important to learn grammar and the technicalities when you're first learning a language, but I also think it's just as important to practice your conversation with native speakers. So, and it's not something that's easy for me because I get very nervous and I'm worried that I'm like saying something wrong or that I'm like they're gonna judge me and make fun of me. But I think it's really important, and that's really the only way that you can become fluent in a language because you're not learning just the basic things that they teach you in the books and like in classes and stuff, but you're learning like the cultural slang and like the things that people usually say and stuff like that. So,
what would you say to somebody that's afraid to speak? How can they get over that fear?
That's a hard one. I think you have to really want it. You have to really want to be able to speak the language. But another thing that could be very helpful is the language exchange.
Okay.
So where you speak a language with someone and they speak the language that you were trying to learn and you speak the language that they are trying to learn. So then you're both in the same boat. You're learning, you're both a little bit nervous, and then you're not afraid to like call each other out, correct each other on things, and it's a lot less tense, I feel.
Yeah, I would agree because that's how I've learned Italian and Portuguese is through language exchanges, and I feel like that is a great way to learn. Just like you said, you're in the same boat, so it's not as like awkward as maybe somebody who speaks your language well, and then you don't have that fear of making mistakes, because making mistakes is part of learning. It's part of the process. Yeah, I love that. What will be your next language that you'll learn?
Oh, that's a good one. I really love Portuguese.
Oh,
yeah?
Yes, that's amazing. I love Portuguese too.
I think it's a beautiful language, and like Brazil has a beautiful culture, and I have a really good friend who lived for a long time in Brazil, and she always speaks to me in Portuguese, and it's so beautiful, just like a very rich, very rounded language. So hopefully that can be my next one.
Well, hey, if you learn it, then we can also have Portuguese too, converse it.
That'd be fun.
That's awesome. So you said you think it's hard to learn a language out being in the country, but that speaks the language, but I feel like so many people don't have the opportunity to travel. I think a lot of people are trying to learn English. What advice would you give to them being in their country, not being able to travel?
So one thing that helps me a lot to keep up my Spanish and my Swedish when I'm not actively there, but I'm home in the US, is I listen to a lot of music in the language, and I watch pretty much all the shows and movies that I watch are in that language. And that helps me a lot, because I feel like when you're hearing the language actively, it sticks more, and then I'm able to keep up my pronunciation and things like that. Yeah.
That's great
advice. Also, if you can find friends over social media that speak the language and just ask them, hey, would you mind like maybe having a conversation with me or something a couple of days a week? You know, anything helps. Really, just exposure to the language in any form helps.
Really good. Thank you so much for being here. This was super fun to chat with you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And hopefully we'll get to have you back soon. Maybe do a little interview in Portuguese in the future.
Oh, yeah, hopefully.
Yes.
Definitely.
If you guys liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and comment below. We'll see you soon. Ciao.
Ciao.
I forgot to drink at the beginning. I just saluted and put it back down.
Ciao.
Yeah. Ciao.